Can you hear me? Am I being echoed? There I go, right? You guys can hear me a little bit? I have a big mouth, so I'm able to project, but we are also going to be online. So, all right, so welcome everybody. I'm so excited to see everybody here. I'm just excited to be with other humans. I'm sure many of you, we've done a year online with just your jobs. I'm sure a lot of your jobs, if you're a person who works normally outside of the home, your jobs have kind of shifted to inside the home. So you've got to take care of kids, do what you need to do with them. If you have a spouse, you got to deal with that too. You got to take care of the house, and how complicated it is now. The waters get muddied into where's my job and where's my home life, and how do I kind of tease the two apart, which if you're not used to doing that, can really be a huge challenge and make both sides suffer a little bit, both your job, your family life, and everything else that you have going on. So I applaud you guys on being here. The Family Cafe is a tremendous support that our state government takes care of the price tag in bringing you guys here. They didn't do that because they came up with it on their own. There were advocates, Lori Fahey, who put this together. And I was talking a few minutes ago to the group about partners in policymaking. This conference was actually Lori Fahey's project when she was in Partners in Policymaking. It grew from being a couple people sitting at a kitchen table talking about, hey, we should do some kind of conference, into thousands of people. 2 years ago, we had 13,000 people here. I mean, it is a tremendous conference. It is a tremendous opportunity for our state government to show that they support people with disabilities. So I encourage you to, fill out those feedback forms, talk to the people with the red chef's outfits on, that's the staff and the team, and talk to them and tell them, what you like about it, or maybe you know of something that maybe could be considered for the future. They're really looking for your input, so I encourage you to kind of let them know. But again, I'm so glad to see everybody here. All right, so today we're going to be talking about IEPs. And the first couple of slides I'm going to share with you is just we're going to go over these 5 steps. And then I'm going to get into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes of the IEP. Now, normally, if you go to any IEP training and it is we have an hour today, I can tell you it's not going to be able to really teach you everything that you need to know about an IEP. I have been, just a little background on me, I have a 26-year-old who has autism. Prior to having my children, I actually worked for Broward County Schools, which is the 6th largest school district in the country. And the position that I was in, I'm one of those people who believe everything happens for a reason. So I had 2 different positions. The first position I had with the school district, I was hired as a temp. I was going to school myself. I was young, and I just wanted to have some kind of temporary thing to do. And it was in the budget office. I didn't know anything about budget. I didn't know anything about numbers. I was basically just the runner. So I would come in, the director would, have different types of budgeting reports that had to go to the superintendent's office for signatures, and this was prior to Wi-Fi or any of that stuff that we're used to today. So physically, the report got printed, and I had to run across the parking lot into the superintendent's office. And I got to meet the superintendent. I knew the superintendent, I knew all the staff, I knew the school board members, because that was what I was used to doing. I learned about the budget, and then the next position I took was that of what's called a confidential secretary to a principal. I don't know what you guys think as far as who makes rules and who sets up classes in schools, but I used to sit with the principal, and we would figure out classes and divvy up girls, boys, disabilities, not disability, to make the classes as, kind of heterogeneous as we could. And so you might think a lot of thought goes into that, and sometimes it does, but sometimes it's literally the secretary and the principal putting together classes. That's why it's important for you to be having conversations with your school administrator and not just the person who runs your IEP meetings, because those are the people who are making those kind of decisions. So in that position, I got to know all about FTE, which is the funding mechanism that if your kid is in a Florida public school, they get these FTE reports, and that's the money that comes in. The matrices, so that matrix, if you have a kid with an IEP, there's a matrix score, and that is money. If you choose to go use your McKay scholarship, your Gardner scholarship, that funding, all that stuff. So I didn't know anything about disabilities, but I knew the budget and how everything was allocated. Then I decided I'm gonna have my children, I'm gonna stay home, this is what I'm gonna do. And then my second son was diagnosed. And then, like many of you, I'm sure, I had to advocate for a diagnosis because my pediatrician kept saying, give it time, don't compare him to his brother, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard the same story because it's still happening today. And that was about 24 years ago. And we still hear a lot of those same issues happening with our pediatricians. So then I figured out, okay, I have to advocate for a diagnosis. Now I have to advocate for school. I got on as many committees as I could. I was on a committee, and somebody who's the administrator offered me a position, and the organization is called Family Network on Disabilities of Broward County. So I've been with them for 22 years. I'm an educational advocate. I go into IEP meetings every day, multiple times a day. I learn something new in every single meeting. If you do not practice, it's like the gym. If you do not go to the gym and go fairly consistently, you do not get fit. If you do not practice some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, you're not going to get better. You will be okay. You will learn a little bit. But if you're having one IEP meeting for your child a year, really not going to gain that much information. So when you have opportunities to jump on committees, to go, if your district has an advisory committee, go to those. Anything that you can where you can learn from other people, have more than one IEP meeting a year. I don't think that I ever had one a year for my son. You need to have at least two, and that's in a good year. If there are issues, you gotta make them a little crazy sometimes until you get to the bottom of that. Okay, so I do that. I am the coordinator of the Florida Partners in Policymaking program. You could check that out tomorrow morning. I'm gonna give you guys a flyer on that before we end. So I encourage you guys, you have to be a parent or the direct care provider of a person, child, adult, doesn't matter, with a developmental disability, or a self-advocate, so a person with a developmental disability yourself, to get into that program. I cannot say enough about how fabulous it is, and I will share that information. Look, I got a graduate over there. It is truly, truly amazing. And it's a little overwhelming because it teaches you a lot, but for the sake of today and just talking about IEPs, again, we're not gonna be able to cover a whole lot. You can come see me afterwards, and I have my contact information so we can talk, because unfortunately I'm gonna have to move fairly quickly through this. But Rights Law, if you ever get to go to a Rights Law conference, Pete Wright is a rock star. He is truly amazing. You could look at rightslaw.com and check out his stuff. He's an attorney. He's really great. Sometimes you could get, because sometimes there's a fee, and sometimes, like in my school district, when I went, it was literally the school district, because all of your school districts get parent education dollars. So if you don't know what your school district is spending those money on, you should ask, because my school district actually brought them in, the team, and so it was free to families, and it was pretty incredible. So I encourage you to do that. All right, so the things we're going to talk about here. All right, let's see if I can. Okay. All right, so step one, you got to consider the relationship that you have with your school a business relationship. You're not Facebook friends. That's not, if you want to be Facebook friends with your child's teacher, you can, but you have to look at it as a business relationship, because it will cloud your decisions to advocate if you're mushy-gushy, touchy-feely. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be, a bully or obnoxious, but you really, and I know that there are people who think differently about this. I never brought cookies. I don't bring cookies to IEP meetings. I've been at plenty of meetings where the parents bring cookies and coffee and bagels and all that stuff. And as somebody who goes to multiple meetings all the time, there's no benefit to that. There's not. If you like it because it gives you that warm, giving feeling, then you do it. But I just want you to know that you're not buying their IEP love with your stuff. You're not. And actually, I think that you're kind of showing that you're willing to maybe take less than what you should. If you go in there and you are serious, like this is a business, because your IEP is a contract. Your school is now developing a contract of what they're going to provide to your child. So you need to look at it like that. You could still be friendly, you could still be warm, but you need to make sure that they understand that this is a contract and it is a business relationship. Don't micromanage your child's education. For one, it'll drive you insane. You got multiple players, and we saw that through COVID, right? You went from, some kids have a whole team. So they've got their ESE teacher, the special ed teacher, they have their regular ed teacher, they have a speech therapist, they have an OT, a PT, a counselor, a paraprofessional. They have all these people, and they're home. And they've got one, if they're lucky, two parents in the home. And so, we had to, basically, we were forced into a position where we had to micromanage because it was us. This is how it was going. And for some of you guys, you didn't have so much support from your school during COVID, because I saw plenty of those. If you're lucky, you did have support through COVID. But a lot of you guys were on your own. And so since you've had that experience now of having to manage everything, when your kids are back in school, put as much of the onus on the school now as you're comfortable doing, because it will just rattle your cage, and it's gonna harm the relationship with you and your school if you try to micromanage everything. And it's a gift sometimes, and we could talk about that more later. All right, don't get overly emotional. And I have some families that will intentionally start to cry because they think that works for them. Doesn't work for you. It actually shows, it gives off a feeling or a message that you're weak. Now, if you are upset, all you need, and if you're sitting there, so it depends on, the situation, if you're online or if you're sitting there and you're getting upset, just go, you know what, I need a minute. And you just walk out. And you go in the bathroom, you go out to your car, you do whatever you have to do, you regroup, and you come back in. If you're online, you can say the same thing. You know what? I need a minute. And you just go off. I was in an IEP meeting last week that it was my first one with this family, and it was interesting because when I got in the meeting, the person running it saw me, and she knew me from other meetings, and she said, I'm so glad to see you here. Okay, when a school tells you that they're so glad to see you here as an advocate, something's up. I didn't know, because this was a new family to me, so I didn't really know yet. But oh my, that mom lit up and went off. She started yelling at them in the online format really quick. And the ESE specialist, the one who was running the meeting, said, you know what, I'm going to shut this down. And so that mom was teetering on the edge of everything falling apart. So I had to say, okay, so just give us a minute. We went offline. I called mom, and I'm like, what is going on? And so we talked about it, and I said, okay, you need to give this responsibility to me, because you are too emotionally charged up right now, and you're going to lose everything that we're advocating for. And so she did. She regrouped. She let me do most of the talking, and then by just having someone with her, she was able then to come back in and participate and engage without falling apart. And it was a very good meeting. We ended up getting everything that she wanted out of the meeting and everything that her child needed. But if I wasn't there to make that stop, they would have cut it, which they can do. Your school can say, you know what, we're done with this meeting. So you have to be really careful and just take a minute. It's okay just to take a minute. Don't accept profiling. So, she's a girl, she's a young girl, that we do this or we do that for all these young girls who, have autism, or we do all this for kids who use wheelchairs or whatever. I don't ever listen to any of that stuff, because that's not, remember, and sometimes you have to remind them what the I in the IEP, individualized every single meeting that you have. If you are an advocate and you're attending multiple meetings, that meeting that you're sitting in is for that kid. Do not listen to, we do this with this kid, or we do that, that's not. And again, you don't have to be obnoxious. You could very nicely say, I understand that the I means individualized. So aren't we supposed to like look at my kid as an individual? And that makes them all go, oh, okay, she's been talking to somebody. And then they will come back and they'll regroup. All right, so we got Dorothy here. So this is the part that I think is really important. You need to look at the IEP kind of like your crystal ball. So when you get the draft, hopefully you guys are getting a draft before your meeting. If you're not, ask for it, because my county gives the drafts out normally around 5 days before the meeting, sometimes not. But when my son was young, they didn't do that, but I would ask for it. I would say to them, I want to get the IEP, because even as an advocate, because I started advocating when he was little, if I got to an IEP meeting and the teachers came rushing in, was like, oh, sorry we're late, but you know, he was under the desk this morning and it took us like 10 minutes to get him out, forget it. My brain, even with my training, is what happened? How did he get under the desk? What did you do? Why was he that upset? Oh my goodness, my baby, what happened? And so if you don't normally get a draft of the IEP in advance, ask them for one. Okay, so I would ask for it. I would sit on my couch at night when everybody was asleep and look at the IEP and look for certain things that were in it. So here's just a couple of them. All right, so things like if it says, writing has greatly improved, okay? If you have occupational therapy, that could mean, yeah, we're talking about reducing your therapy. Okay, so that's why you need to read the IEP. The present level of performance should describe who your child is today. It should, and I've seen a lot of this lately. You know, they're pulling out stuff from pre-COVID, and it's still in there. What I do is I'll look at the new IEP that I get for a student, and then I'll look at last year's. And I'm side by side. I'm comparing the two IEPs, for one, to see if the student has grown, because all of your kids should change every year. I don't care what their diagnosis, their disability, or their eligibility is. That is meaningless information to me. Every student is an individual. Every student has the ability to make progress. Some kids' progress are to a certain level, some kids are to another. That's fine, but everybody should be making meaningful progress, and I'm not going to get into it today, but there's a case, the Endrew case, E-N-D-R-E-W, and it actually went to the Supreme Court a couple years ago. I want to say 2017. And in that case, Judge Roberts had said that improvement for a student with a disability cannot be, the Latin term is de minimis. And de minimis basically means like hardly anything. So even the Supreme Court of the United States said that it's not, progress can't be like this much. It has to be meaningful to the student. And every student, everybody in here representing a student, your student's different. There are no two kids. That's why there's an I in the IEP, because no two kids are the same. Okay, so that's why you can't let people say that to you. Hold on a second. Did you have a question? I know you had your hand up.
I keep asking for a draft of the IEP, and the district keeps telling me that it's a work in progress, and they're not done with it till the day of the IEP.
The services, yes. So on a real draft, you know, one that's actually, you know, it will be the present level and the goals. So it would be predetermination. It's called predetermination, which is illegal for them to give you the services. So that they shouldn't do. But, because that's the decisions are there. But as long as it says draft on it and the present level of performance and the goals, so just, well, then you could just say to them, I understand what you're talking about. You're talking about predetermination, and that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking to see the present level of performance and the goals. There are counties, like Miami-Dade County, for instance, they give the parent the whole thing, soup to nuts, as a draft. My county doesn't. It's just the draft, and I think, I mean, the present level, which I find in most of the counties, that's what we're getting. Do you have a question?
I've experienced the same thing. I would go to the meeting and goals yet, and I'm at the meeting, do I still have a right to say, you know what, we're done here, you're wasting my time?
Yes.
We need to reschedule.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who has an IEP, you can call the meeting at any time. They can do what's called a multiple meeting IEP. In my district, the computer system that they use actually allows them to have 13 different meetings to finish one annual IEP. The system, the computer system, the program they use is already set up for multiple meetings. So you can ask that, you know, you guys aren't ready. And if they know that you're going to do that, they will do a better job on the front end because they don't want to look at you again.
Yeah, because they when I request another meeting, they roll their eyes, they give me
Oh,
a
yeah.
hard time.
Yeah.
What? We gotta do this again. You know?
Yeah, no, I would, and it's like data too. When my son was young, I would let the teachers know, and I had a good relationship with his teachers, but I would say, I'm gonna wanna see data, just giving you a heads up. It's just the way it is. I'm gonna wanna see it, because I wanna make sure that he's actually making the progress that we're talking about, and that way they already always had it ready. Did I always ask for it? No. No. Because if he was doing good and I was pretty satisfied with everything, I wouldn't ask for it. But they always had it because they always thought that, you know, I was going to ask for it. The other thing is, and it's just kind of a benefit of being an advocate, is that when you're an advocate, and even if you show this through your advocacy for your child, if they think that you will file due process, they're just gonna plan better. I never filed due process for my son, but they always knew that I would. And sadly, that's kind of the position that you have to establish. You can have a great relationship with your schools, but you have to be able to give off an air of either one, I know this stuff, or two, I know people who know this stuff, and that you will access those people to get whatever it is that your child needs out of the public system. Because when you convey that message, they do a better job. It's just the way it is. Yep.
If you're going to cover in a later slide, feel free to tell me. So if they do say something like, because I've actually had to deal with literally all three of those currently, and they say like, writing is greatly improved, we want to drop this OT. But if the OT is the only reason that his writing is maintaining, how do we fight that? Because they are recommending dropping it because of he's reached the milestone, but if he doesn't, then it's
Right.
gonna fall
Well, with OT, for example, I love OTs. My son got OT until he was like I don't even know. I think he was like 12th grade. I don't know. I think he probably always had it. OTs are, and that's, you kind of have to do some learning for yourself. OTs are not handwriting experts. They do so much more. So yes, it's motor planning, because that's what handwriting is, right? Actually, when we speak, it's motor planning. There's some, if you guys have kids who are nonverbal, I am like hot and heavy into motor planning, researching for myself, and students who are not able to verbally communicate. So check that stuff out, it's pretty interesting. But anyway, motor planning is one of the things that OTs are really good at. That's where their training is. That has to do with organization, transition, yes, handwriting, coordination of using your hands together, using scissors. I mean, there are so many things that an OT does. So the best way to be able to approach that is know what an OT is trained to do. And then, I mean, there are kids who make so much progress that they don't qualify anymore, because they're doing really good. And that's what we all want. So that's a good thing. But you want to make sure, so like with the OT, you're going to look to see, okay, well, let me look and see what else OTs do. So if your kid's school desk is like a mess, the pours out onto the floor, that's organization. That's an OT can help with that. They help them organize their environment, their brain, their body in space, their sensory needs that may prevent them from participating and from being organized. So there's a lot more to it. Behavior is impacting the learning of others, or he or she can't maintain attention for more than 5 minutes. That's like a big red flag that we're going to be talking about a special program. that they might have to offer you because your child doesn't belong in a regular classroom. And just so that you know, because it's a lot to get into, but with inclusion, the law is pretty clear that the student is to receive everything that they need in order to make progress in that the non-special ed setting before consideration of, it's a segregated classroom. If your kid is in a classroom that's just for kids with disabilities, it is segregated. Schools don't like when I use that word, but if you're separated, then you are segregated. If that is appropriate to your child and that's working, then that's fine, but you need to be part of that discussion. The law requires them all public schools to look at, again, every student individually to determine where do we start? We start with full inclusion as their topic of conversation, and what does that kid need to be included? If it's a paraprofessional, if it's push in teaching, it could be a whole host of things. And then we back down because, okay, that's not enough for him or her to make progress. And then you move back. But so many times, actually most of the time, they refer to kids as, oh, they're a cluster student, or they're a special ed or SPED or whatever. That's not the way the law says. So if you see that, that's what they're looking for. And, oh, their articulation is so much better. That's kind of code for, yeah, we're going to be cutting speech therapy because he or she doesn't need it anymore. All right, so just some essential components. So FAPE, that's a free and appropriate public education, and your school is required to give that, provide that. Again, every one of you guys, what is appropriate is different. That's why you can't just say, oh, well, this is what we do for these kids. It has to include the student's vision, your vision. Many families, your children are going to either be with you as long as you or they are alive. Some of you will always manage somewhat, even if they don't live with you, you're going to kind of manage their future. You're going to help them get a job. How many people have to help their typical kids find a job, right? Our sisters, our brothers, our spouses. So chances are good that you're going to be wrapped up in that. You have the biggest thing to gain or to lose by the decisions that are made at the IEP table. So you need to be mindful of that your vision needs to be part of the process. Time in regular education with typical peers as much as possible. Goals that are tied to the general curriculum, not just these goals that are these, I don't know. Sometimes I see these goals that are just, I had a student about a month ago, and she has a significant intellectual disability. And she's in a special program for a little bit more than half of her day. And her special educator wrote a goal. Now, let me just say the student can identify some letters. I think they're spending too much time on that. So we kind of regrouped and are going a different path with whole words, because not everybody's going to learn letters and what letters mean. But if they see the word McDonald's, they know what that says and what it means. So I won't get off on a tangent on that. But so the student doesn't recognize most of her letters. She's, I think she's in 4th grade. Yeah, she's in 4th grade. And the goal on the IEP was that she was going to determine what items used electricity to produce heat. So I did what you guys just did. I was like, what? And so I thought, okay, it's me. Let me just, because I had all these, I've been doing this over 2 decades. I've never seen a goal like that. So I thought, okay, maybe it's me. I'm going to learn something new today, because I learn something new in every meeting. So I'm looking at it on the screen, and I can't wrap my brain around it. So I said, I'm sorry, what is that? And the teacher said, oh yeah, this is a skill in the Florida standards. And I go, okay, I don't know, because maybe it is. I can't argue against that. But is this a priority educational need for the student? And the teacher said, yeah. She thought that it was. And I go, okay, so you gotta sell me on this, because this is like right now a no-go, because I would almost bet you I could walk into a 4th grade regular classroom and say, all right, guys and gals, da-da-da-da-da-da, who's got an answer for me? Who can name, because it was 5, who can name 5 items that uses electricity to produce heat? And I'll be lucky if I get a quarter of the class of typical students that could answer that question. And so she was like, oh. Now, if I wouldn't have been there and questioned that, that would have just got in there. That student was not going to master that goal. That goal is meaningless to her. I got nothing functional out of that goal. So you need to be aware of the goals and how meaningful they are, how functional they are, and how does it benefit the student's life. That's what goals should do. They should be related to the general curriculum, but it's more than just that, because you don't write goals for everything. You write goals for priority educational need. And continuously monitored, so you got to monitor goals. And so here's just a slide on goals. I'm sure that you guys have heard this before. They got to be specific, because remember, you're going to be changing. Most of you are going to have new teachers next year, and then you're going to have new teachers, and you're going to have new teachers. That teacher, even if they are a special educator, need to be able to get that IEP and know who's this kid that I've never laid eyes on before, and what can they do, and what are the goals I'm working on, and how are they measurable? Because chances are that that person was not wrapped up in the IEP meetings that happened this year. They didn't benefit from all that conversation that took place. Measurable, gotta be measurable. Action-oriented, what are we going to do? What is this, what do I have to see? Realistically based on assessed needs. They don't get to just, teacher observation stuff. That's completely subjective. Where's the data? What's proving to us that the student needs or doesn't need? Time bound, so it's an annual goal. And then no goal should last forever. You should not see the same goals year after year. And if I polled this audience, I would bet you that a lot of you experience that. Because I see it all the time. When I compare this year's to last year's IEP on a lot of my students, I see the same goals. Something is broken if that's what you see. And you have to make your team do their job and figure out, for one, maybe it's just a nonsensical goal that shouldn't really be there to start off with. Or 2, which is the bigger one, the student is not getting what they need in order to master that goal. Did you have a question?
Do you ever run across where they basically say they're meeting their needs as far as therapy, so we're going to put them on a monitored status because we don't want them missing their classroom time?
I'm not following what you're.
So like, my son had speech and OT, and a couple years ago it was like, oh well, he doesn't really need speech.
To move to collaboration instead of a direct service.
We're putting him on a monitor status, and then a year later, oh well, he's doing good, so we're going to do a monitored OT, and we're doing this because he's doing so well, and we don't want him to miss the class time.
Well, I mean, and that's real. So sometimes I like that, sometimes I don't. It depends on the kid. If your kid is actually making real progress and they're doing good, and they are doing well, they're succeeding, and it is appropriate to reduce, then you do that. But if it's not, then you have to advocate, and you have to go, yeah, no, that's not going to work. That's not. That has nothing to do with the decisions that are to be made by the IEP team. So he's asking about, he gets private therapy. My son got private therapy till he was 21 years old. That's not relevant. Right.
So we're getting it outside of the school system.
Oh, yeah, but I wouldn't allow for that. So the other thing, in your parent input section, all of your IEPs have a parent input section, all of them. So if you have a child, you guys are working with them because of COVID. So you're sinking however many hours into teaching them at home. They're going to private therapy. You document that in there, because if your son is making progress, then you're going to say, yeah, I hope so, because I'm spending a boatload of time and money on it after school. So it's not just you guys on this. So you want to definitely document that in there. But what you choose to do as a family cannot have relevancy on a school to give or don't give a therapy. That being said, though, if you are giving them so much therapy that they are doing fabulous and they really don't need that service, then it's going to get cut because they're only going to give you what the student needs. So as long as they need it, that's where advocacy comes in. Is you have to be able to, and it's a craft, and the more training you get, the better you'll get at it, to be able to determine, okay, is this child actually there to where this is appropriate to reduce this service, or are they not? And again, you only get that through practice. If you're showing up once a year to a meeting, you're not going to get better at figuring that out. Yeah.
I think it kind of piggybacks or very similar to what he was just talking about. I think I just heard it called like tier 1, 2, or 3 intervention, where they had wanted to move it down to the lesser intervention on the monitoring, even though, because they said he was meeting his goal for, specifically for reading, but he was in second grade, and they said, okay, well, we're going to move him down to less intervention because, as you clearly see, he is now reading at a second grade level based off of it, but he was reading at a 2.0 level when it was the end of second grade. And we said, well, no, he is almost a third grader, and you're saying he meets this requirement because he's now at a 2.0, but it's still a 2.0 versus a 3.0, and they kind of said, oh, no, we can just move it to a tier 2. So that's...
Okay, well, that's RTI. So for you guys who are not clear on what he's talking about, so response to intervention, which we have in the state of Florida. So we've got tier 1s, which are basically all students. And then you got tier 2, which is the next level. And this is not IEP. This is like all students. And then you have tier 3. If the student has an IEP, then that RTI stuff is, you could say, kind of irrelevant because they could do the same interventions if they want. I do come across some schools where I actually like their RTI interventions more than I like their special ed, which, is kind of sad for me to say, but that's the way it is. So, but if your child needs services because they're not, and again, it's going to go back to the goals. If you don't have a goal to support the more intensive intervention, you're not going to get it. So the goals are really important because they're not, if you go into a meeting and you're thinking, I want occupational therapy. So he doesn't have it right now and I want it. I think it's gonna be really important because I talked to an OT and I think it's gonna be really important and really great for him or her. You have to have a goal. They don't have to give you a service if there's no goal for that student to work on and there's nothing in the present level that describes the need for it. So that's why that stuff's really important. It's not just about the services page. Evaluation procedures, like I have there. Teacher observation, that's not, you can't just go by teacher observation. They're very subjective. You need data like, let's see if I get this to do. So frequency, like 9 out of 10. Duration, like for 15 minutes. So remaining on task, 15 minutes. And then accuracy, how accurate are they in their responses? Progress and monitoring should be happening all the time. And I will tell you that if you are an advocate or you are a parent who is considering filing due process, the best, for lack of a better word, thing that you can have is going to be data. It's service logs. All of your providers have to keep service logs. If you think that your child didn't get speech therapy for the last 2 months of school, ask for a service log. I've only known of one situation where the person, lied on the service logs, and that person lost their job. So most of them will not do that because they know they can lose their job if they lie on those. So if you're concerned, you can ask to see the service log. You can ask to see the data. They are required to keep it. Oftentimes, I will sit at an IEP meeting and we'll say, can we see the data? Yeah, it's in the classroom. I gotta look around for it, which is code for there's no data, okay? So that's why do like I did and say to your teachers, like soon as you know who next year's teachers are, and it can be very nice. I'm so excited you're going to be my son's teacher. This is going to be really good, and I hope we can really work well together. I'm a data mom. I'm a data dad. I really like to look at data because, you know, we work with him at home, and we want to, you know, make sure that we're working with him or her, and you're working, and we're, like, getting in our grooves to really see the best amount of progress that we can. And so just, you know, I just want to let you know, I'm going to want to see data. And we keep it too, and then the teacher might say, okay, well, how often are you going to ask for data? So I would say 6 to 9 weeks. So if I was going to respond to that, I would say, well, if you guys have a concern, I would say 6 weeks. If you guys are like, oh, she might actually be pretty good, and he's really happy, and I think it's a good school, then you could say 9 weeks. When they send you the progress report, you know, you guys should all be getting a progress report every 9 weeks. That's not data. That's just a progress report with some numbers on it. That's not data. I like data. Ideally, I like graphs. I want to see a line, and I want to see the line going like that. You know, I want to see it going up. And that's why I like graphs, because I don't have a lot of time to pore over data. But I can take a couple seconds, and I can look at a graph and see that line going up. Don't want to see the line go flatlining. I had one parent, when they presented the material and the teacher showed the line that was like that, and the mom said, so my son is dead in your classroom. Because that's what that indicated. And boy, they were like, oh no. You know, he's making progress here and there. And they started coming up with all kinds of stuff, because when she said her son is dead in that class, they didn't know what to say, because that is what that line indicated to his growth in that specific area. Yeah.
Yeah, my question is exactly what you just said, that sometimes the school say that this is report, progress report is a data, it's not a data. But I want to ask you, because I feel like sometimes the school's teacher they don't understand nothing about data. They don't have data.
Right.
And it's hard when you go to IEP and ask for the data, and they just...
But you have the right to data.
So I know, but I have been in situations that it's like you punch the wall because they don't have. And,
You guys all have the right to file due process.
and they don't even know how to do that.
If they do not think that you might file due process, they will continue to do what they are doing. You don't have to file, but they have to think and believe that you will. Those procedural safeguards you sign every year when you show up for your IEP meeting, your annual meeting, and they have you sign that nice little booklet. Now it's all virtual, but they have you sign that, and most of you guys do not read that book. You do not, because I ask families, do you know what you're signing? Oh, no, I don't know. They just tell me to sign it. Then in that book, it describes what your rights are and what you can do if that meeting isn't moving in a positive way, and if your child is not making meaningful progress in their least restrictive environment. You have to know what's in that book. So that situation, I can pretty much guarantee you that if somebody like me emailed your school and said, we need to see the data, it would magically appear. It just has a way of doing that. So you guys, you have to let them know. Yep. Yeah, I don't, for like individual things, I'm not going to file a state complaint. Now, state complaint, if it's something that is happening, like if you guys think that it's a school issue, definitely state complaints. But when it's just something that's related to one student, has to do with their IEP, then I just file due process. I'm not, I don't like local conflict resolution. I don't know, I don't think I've ever just filed for that. We do end up in resolution, because what happens is when you guys file due process, then the judge in Tallahassee says to your school district, attempt to resolve. So then there'll be a resolution meeting, and those should be pretty productive. I've only had 3 cases in 22 years that actually went before a judge. One, I was the expert witness on. One, I was with a mom who I had already told her, you're not going to win this case. But I thought what she was asking for was rather interesting. She didn't have the right to it, but I thought it was an interesting, out-of-the-box kind of thinking. She did not win. She stopped it. She stopped the meeting like halfway through, and she said to the judge, I just want to thank you because I don't really care if I win or lose, but I wanted a judge to understand my system and what's happening to my system and in my system. And the judge really appreciated that. And what she got out of it was actually better, in my opinion, than what she had filed for. And then the other case, it was like a really good case. It was like it's the technical stuff that really actually helps cases, be easy. Things like when you look at your IEP and there's a list of names of who attended, but yet you're like, wait, I weren't there. That's illegal. Easy win, easy. Where's the silver platter? Because that's falsifying contracts. So it's that kind of stuff that most families don't think about, and man, they will bring out the silver platter. Okay, well, that was, and sometimes I'll even say to the school, I get it, you guys, it was an error. You can't make those kind of errors because now you're stuck. Now you're going to have to basically fork it over. And those are the kind of things that will make for a nice case for a family. I look at IEP meetings kind of like playing poker. There's certain cards I'm going to lay down, and there's certain cards I'm going to hold up here, and I'm not going to show. And it takes a while to kind of figure out, how to do that. But some of those things, like because I see the names on there, I'll talk to the parent and I'll say, was so-and-so there? No. Well, I'm not going to just throw that out there. First, I'm going to see if I can get everything that I think the student needs without it. And if that's a no, because you're going to argue with me, I'll go, do you know that her name was on this IEP? And mom tells me she wasn't there. What? What? And then all of a sudden, the whole room changes. And, we were rethinking that. And we think we could do that. So it's really important to be aware of those kind of things. Question?
So I'm a teacher in the school system, also an SLT teacher.
Mhm.
One thing that you said just resonated, just making sure that you begin the year with, without assumptions, but holding accountable. Just start the year with accountability, saying, hey, this is my son, and I'm a data mom. Like that, as a parent of a child with a disability, as a teacher who enjoys and loves IEP meetings, because that's the time where you just put everything out on the line. I'm a data mom. I ask where's the data, and I also hold everyone at the table, responsible of where's your data and how can we use our data to best accommodate the child. That is so important because when you don't hold sometimes the teachers and those in the IEP meetings accountable for the data, then guess what? Sometimes those services that are written so pretty on the IEP, they're not being serviced.
Right.
And that is the honest truth.
Right.
They sit there, they give you these pretty words, how they're going to accommodate your child, but what will tell your story is the data. And don't just give me the data. I want to see the physical copy of your progress monitoring. I want to see your service logs. How did my son respond to speech therapy? How did my son respond to occupational therapy? And then I'm that parent, I'm that teacher, I'm that person that says, do you have any physical?
Right. Work samples.
Yes. Do you have any something that he's written? When I'm meeting with my parents, because I was also the Zoom teacher this semester, and I would also record little
I think that a lot of parents this year, at least mine that I work with, have been able to see what's happening in school. And a lot of families are not returning because they were given the opportunity to see, like, what are the expectations for my student? So, all right, I gotta kind of move so we can get, okay, so inclusion, if your kid is off regular standards, they could still be included in a regular classroom. There's no, again, that's the I in the IEP, they could be in regular ed on modified curriculum in the regular setting, so they're included with their peers. Separation is not equal. We know that in every facet of every part of who we are as humans, and it's the same thing with people with disabilities. Inclusion is a civil right. It just is. And sometimes I have to remind school teams that it is a civil right. Inclusion without support is not inclusion. So although this isn't an inclusion training, inclusion is very much a part of who I am, and inclusion, good inclusion, is hard. It is not easy. So when I start having those conversations with the school team, and they're like, oh, Stacy, I'm like, listen, I get it. It's hard, because you're gonna have to sink a lot of support in for this student to make them be successful, help them in that classroom. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong. That means that you gotta work hard. And I've been doing this long enough. Just this week, Thursday, I had a couple kids that are twin brothers that graduated. I was their advocate when they were 3, when they came in, and now they've graduated. So I've been with them their entire education. Inclusion, and they're twins, and one of them he's on regular standards, the other one is not. And school has been very hard for both of them. And those boys have such incredible potential for their future because they have been included for their education, even when it was really, really hard. And I have no doubt that they're going to go on to be very successful adults. All right, accommodations and modifications. So, accommodations are like extra time and that kind of stuff. So it's what a student gets to be able to participate in the regular standards. Like I said, extra time. We heard the speaker this morning, if you got to see him, he had enlarged print when he was in school. So those kind of things. Modifications are when what the student is expected to learn and to show is at a reduced level. So maybe for the regular standard on, photosynthesis, they have to understand the entire process of photosynthesis. And maybe for a kid that's off of standards, they need to know that light from the sun helps turn plants green. So it could be at a much lower level, but still participating. Behavior and discipline. If behavior is keeping the kids from general education, there needs to be documented in IEP and a functional behavior plan created, or a functional behavior assessment done, and then looking at a positive behavior intervention plan. So many times I'll have kids that are in a special program who have behaviors, and I'll say, oh, well, the IEP says there's no behavior plan. Oh, no, we don't need a behavior plan. And, okay, why isn't Susie in a regular classroom? Oh, she has behaviors. Okay, why is there no behavior plan? So, again, the goal is to be included with typical peers their age. So what does the student need to get that? They shouldn't be sent home. So if you're getting a call, oh, he did it again, you got to come and pick him up. I personally would say, and I tell my clients, is he suspended? Oh, no, he's not suspended. Well, if you're asking me to pick him up, then that sounds like a suspension to me. And then they'll usually go, don't pick him up. We'll figure it out. Because the suspension means they're going to document it. And I know a lot of parents are like, but I don't want him suspended. Don't want that. But then you don't have the data to prove that they're not doing what they should be doing for your student. So I get it's a little painful at that step, but I promise you it will pay off in a positive way. The focus shouldn't be on changing, it should be on changing the behavior, not a punishment. if you would have said to my kid, you're getting time out. Yes. Oh, God. This is so awesome. I get to go over there away from all these other people, these little people that keep getting in my business and my space. And I'm going to go sit over there all by myself and stim and do what I want to do. How sweet is this? So it just doesn't make sense. And the discipline matrix, all your districts have a discipline matrix. It's a guideline. So if somebody tries to say, oh, well, we have to suspend or we have to do this or we have to do that, no, it's a guideline. And then your administrator gets to, use, hopefully, their resources to figure out what to do. So services. Services are meant to give a student what they need so that they can be successful in the general setting. It actually says this in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the law of the land when it comes to kids with disabilities. Everything, no matter where your child is, what program, what school, all that stuff, is so to give them what they need so that they could be included, participative humans in school and in their lives when they are graduates and move on. All of it is to that. Principals, especially in high schools, their responsibility for all their students is one of two things: prepare a kid for a job or to prepare a kid for post-secondary education for all of their students. If you have a high schooler and they're not being set up for one of those two things, it's broken. It's not babysitting. School is not babysitting. It should not be considered babysitting. It should not be accepted as babysitting. So be looking at your goals in your IEP. Where is it taking your student? Related services. So I just have a list here of what those are: speech and language, transportation, interpreter services, counseling services, physical therapy, occupational therapy. And the list goes on. So just be aware of, what the related services are. Related means related to the special education that your student needs. Yeah. I can't.
For individuals who have disabilities who want to go to college and go to do their internships or school-related, is that classified as related services?
No.
No?
No. So, related services are basically, I know there's a few in there that are a little wonky because there's also nursing services, but it's a service, usually it's like a therapeutic type of service. Now, what you need to know, if you don't, actually I grabbed some because I wanted to show you guys. If you guys have not been to the Project 10 table in the exhibit hall, I want you to go over there. There's a couple things that they have. I don't care if your kid is 3. These are really good. I love Project 10. They have such good stuff. I stole so much stuff from their table today that I'm going to give out to families in my area because, when my son was young and people said, oh, you got to start thinking about transition, and he was like 5. I'm like, I can't even think about it next week. I'm not thinking about transition and moving on. But let me tell you, you have to at least be making a best guess as to where you want your student to get. So back to your question, when you have a transition IEP, you have to be talking about post-secondary goals, which is post-secondary meaning moving on from life. So it is really, the team has to kind of be making like a best guess with the student's involvement. The student has to be part of that process. And again, it's irrelevant to me as to the independence level of the student. All students should be involved to to what they're able and interested. Because I have some kids that come in and they're like, oh, I don't want to be here. And so I want you, if that's your kid, I want you to also think, how great is it to come into a room where all these other people are talking about what you cannot do? Nobody wants to do that. It's pretty gross. It is the process, though. We have to be able to tell what a student can and cannot do in order to get them the services that they need. So you can have those preliminary conversations and knock out some of the dark stuff that you don't want to do, but the student really needs to be in there. And like for me, when I have a student in a meeting, I tell them I am your advocate. And sometimes it's very sad but I'll be the one that will actually look at the student and go, what do you want? What do you need? And, you know, if I have a student that doesn't verbally communicate, I have a host of visuals that I bring. I will get with the student in advance and we'll go over some things and talk about like career planning and stuff like that. So transition is in IDEA law. The schools are required to focus on it. It's not usually something that's addressed under related services, but it can be, but it has to be tied into like those post-secondary goals and transition and stuff. All right, so state and district assessments, so you guys know, each year you have to determine if the student will take the, FSA or not. I can't explain why this year I have found more than all the other years, students, mostly in middle school, who have been removed from standards who should not have been. When you remove a student from regular standards, their trajectory will change. Sometimes that's good if you guys all thought about it, and is this student really meeting, there's the criteria. You don't just pull a kid off of standards just because you feel like it. So there's questions that need to be asked. If your child does not have a documented IQ, and I hate IQ, so don't beat me up. It's one of the questions has to do with intellectual ability, and I get most of our kids, if we could actually get a real IQ on them, it's going to be higher than what they tested at. But if your kid has a 70 or higher IQ, I'm going to tell you right now, they should not be, it's not that they shouldn't be removed from regular standards, but they shouldn't easily be removed from standards. So that's a serious conversation. If they have a 70 or 71 IQ, that conversation needs to be a lot more serious. Because one of the questions is does the student have an intellectual impairment? But anyway, if your student is off of regular standards, at least presently, they are not going to go to college and graduate from a degree seeking, getting a college degree. They're not going to get a certification, like a regular certification. Even the one, I don't know if you guys know this, there's actually a certification to lube and tires on a car. They won't be able to get that one either if they're not on regular standards. So you make a lot of changes for their future when you remove them from regular standards. There are some of us that are advocating in the state to get more opportunities and options for people who graduate off of regular standards, but it is a battle that continues. All right, let me just finish up and then we'll get to questions. All right, so this is just when they turn 14. I mean, right there in the law, services are designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. It's in the law. Transition from age 14 and up is in the federal law. 18, when you're a student, and it doesn't matter disability, doesn't matter any of that, when they turn 18, unless you have transferred their rights, they consume all their rights as all of, anybody who is in here as a parent. When you turned 18, you got the next level of rights. Your kids are the same. Most of the time, schools, they still invite you to meetings even after they're 18, all that stuff. I had a couple years ago, one of the other advocates that works with me called me, and I'd never had it happen to me before. But the mom filed due process. The kid was 19. She did not transfer the rights. So she filed due process. The judge kicked it back and said, you have no right. You can't file due process. Your student, your child, your 19-year-old holds their rights. And so it was dead. It was dead in the water. So they had to regroup, and then they had to come back in where he actually filed due process. But I just tell you that story because you need to know that once they're 18, they're 18. All right, so the IEP, when it's written, if you don't agree, you're going to make a note in the parent input section, or some of your IEPs have what's called the notes section. You can put it there too. Exercise your right to file due process, mediation, file a state complaint. There's different reasons to do each. Procedural safeguards is where your rights are, and it describes these things. After the meeting, so you're going to talk about your successes, let the other members know that you're pleased. You always want to be sure, like even in your parent input section, I encourage you to start with a positive note, and then you can go into whatever the concerns were that you had. Continue to check to make sure that things are working well. If there's deadlines mentioned, if the teacher says, you know what, I'm gonna get that done. I'm gonna do that diagnostic assessment of reading because I think we do need that information. Okay, when? And then you're gonna have to follow up because, you know, they get busy. They got a bunch of kids, life, it's like, you know, especially if they're a teacher and they have kids. And like this mom teacher here, a lot of my clients are teachers, OTs, PTs. Don't ever assume that because you work for the system, you get preferential treatment. I actually see the contrary. It's almost like the system thinks, you work here, what are you gonna do? So it's kind of sad, but deadlines, okay. And then if there's any problems, ask for help and you wanna communicate. You can have on your IEP, there's a accommodation that you can have that is like daily or weekly collaboration with the parent kind of thing. And basically it's a home note. The home note is for you. Otherwise they wouldn't do it. So if you get a home note that has a bunch of happy face or sad face stamps on it, if that doesn't give you what you need as the family, it's trash. I would develop my son's home note myself. And I would put on there what I wanted to know, because just because I thought it was important wasn't necessarily that the teacher thought it was important. So I would create my own. I would make it as short and simple as I could, make a bunch of copies, and I'd bring it into her and say, here, so if you could just use this home note for me, that'd be awesome, because it's going to tell me exactly what I need. So I encourage you guys to do that, but be involved. So I was talking before about partners in policy making, so I have some flyers for that. If you're interested in, I'm going to be doing a presentation on it tomorrow morning at 10:30 in the main ballroom. Partners in Policymaking is an advocacy and leadership training program. If you're really looking to make systems change, not like an IEP thing, but systems, write laws, influence the governor. If you guys got to see the governor last night, influence the governor and those other people that were up on the stage. And your school district, your school board, you know, your school board, they're elected, which means they're supposed to represent you. If they are not doing that, you need to know how to influence them. So I have flyers for that program. It's free. And even like if this year is going to be online again, if you are a parent who needs to hire childcare so that you could participate, the DD Council pays for that. If you are a person with a disability and you need a personal care assistant there with you so that you can participate, they pay for that. So it's a really fabulous program. They do everything they can to make it easy to participate in. And like if you missed it, Lori Fahey, who started this conference, this was her project through the Partners in Policymaking program, this conference. So it's pretty incredible. You learn all kinds of things. And I would say that really the most impressive advocates in the state of Florida are graduates of this program. So thank you all. You could come up, ask me questions, and I'm going to hand these out.